In 1998, CII released seminal research on project delivery performance that, for the first time, provided owners with empirical data from which to select project delivery methods. This study literally changed the way that projects are delivered in our industry. The Charles Pankow Foundation and CII recently funded an update study to determine what has changed in the last 20 years. Here to present their findings, please welcome Bryan Franz and Keith Molenaar.
Well, good afternoon. I'm extremely excited to be here speaking with you today. Let me tell you a little bit about why. We're going to revisit some work that was done 20 years ago. And at that time, I was just spent about 10 years working in the construction industry for my father's construction company in low bid construction, and then worked for a construction manager right before I got back into academics. Oops. And sorry, we're having a little bit of trouble with the notes here. What excited me about this project is that as I was getting back into or starting my research career, this was a study that CII was doing, and I was a brand new researcher, and it was really the project that I'd hoped to take a look at. I was very interested in project delivery methods and how they might impact performance, and this study was just being undertaken at that time. And so fast forward 20 years when we got a chance to take a look at this project and revisit how project delivery methods impact performance. I was extremely excited to get a chance to look at it. And so we're going to talk with you about it today. So the work is complete, and I encourage you to take a look at it. On your left is the 1998 study that was done with a research team. And again, exceptional work. It's about 30 pages long. The one that we just finished up here last year was updated in a similar manner with the exact same methods, so we could take a look at those benchmarks. This document is really written a little bit more concisely and right to the point. It's about 8 pages long and covers the same work. But we also address some additional reasons for the delivery method performance in addition to just addressing the benchmarks themselves. So I'd encourage you to take a look at those products. So what do we want you to leave here with today? We want you to be able to describe the project delivery systems and really know how they impact or correlate with cost and schedule. We'd like to, in addition to that, look at what variables, why these things vary, and the reasons behind it, and then finally recognize practices in successful projects. That last one is something that we've added to the original study by examining some of the best performing and worst performing projects. So again, why did CII take this on in the beginning, and why did we revisit it again? Really what we're trying to give owners is better information to make project delivery decisions. Again, when I started work in the early 90s, we really mainly focused on low bid construction and a separation of design and construction. If you look at the traditional delivery method of design bid build, where I was taught in my classroom, and what I really try to avoid teaching in my classroom today is that there's a complete separation of architecture and construction, or engineering and construction. Fast forward a little bit, the next delivery method there is construction manager at risk, where we try and get construction knowledge infused early in the process. And we do that through more of an agent-based or a two-phased construction management contract, or that third method is design build, where we're doing both design and construction under one contract and really bringing in that construction knowledge early. So what we're trying to do here is make sure that owners have information on how these methods perform. So in 1998, this was really the study that changed a lot of the way that owners procure construction, design and construction, especially in the public sector. until this point, we really didn't have a lot of information on how performance was related with project delivery methods. If you look here, these are the three main metrics that this study originally dealt with, and these are median values. So these are the center value on those 351 projects. And what owners found was that design bid build had the highest cost growth and also the highest schedule growth, and at that time was also delivering projects at the slowest rate in terms of a square foot per month rate. CMR, CM at risk, or CMGC, depending upon what part of the country you're from, was doing better, but design build was performing the best. And if you see that median value in 1998 there in the middle for schedule growth, that 0 is because the middle projects were being delivered on time. So I know we've been here a while now, almost 2 hours, and just to continue in our activities here, I'd like to ask you to talk in your tables just for a second. What do you think has changed in the last 20 years? What have you seen in the industry change that might influence these results? So just take a few minutes, talk with the person at your table and just say, what have you seen that's changed that might influence these results? That was weird. All right, why don't we pull it back together and let us give you a little perspective from the research team. When we got our research group together to look at this, see if you hit some of the same things here. Certainly technology's changed, right? We weren't using building information modeling. We weren't using some of the technologies that are being showcased today. You know, if you look at LEED certification or sustainability, it was barely in our vocabulary at that time, certainly not the formal certification. And, you know, projects I was on, we weren't using big rooms. We were never talking about integrated project delivery. There truly have been some advances. And so, again, we tend to forget these lessons learned sometimes. You know, this original study really drove, especially the public sector, towards CM at risk, towards design build, away from the low bid mentality, but a lot of times you'll see owners going back to that. And so with these changes, you know, again, CII and Pankow wanted to know, especially looking at design build, does it still outperform those methods? And so if we look at the benchmarks today, what we see is that in terms of cost growth, actually all three delivery methods have gotten better, which is exciting. Design bid build has gotten better in terms of schedule growth, and we're still about the same, again, with these median values. And then overall, we are delivering projects a little bit more slowly. Again, this is that median value, and our data set is just a little bit different than the 351 projects that the original study have. We have a little bit more complex projects, so this does make sense. And what you'll see is actually that design build, the relative growth is actually gotten better. So those are just the median statistics. We really did a lot more digging into this, and what you see is that delivery speed overall has actually improved. Design build is still outperforming the other methods in terms of cost and schedule, and it's actually improved on a square foot cost basis as well. We really had to do some detailed analysis to get to the square foot methods. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Bryan, and he'll speak with you about some of the more in-depth methods that we've looked at.
Thanks. So as Keith had mentioned, this study had a really profound impact on the industry, but it also had a strong impact on academics. It really became the gold standard for how to do research in project delivery methods and how to make a proper comparison and the kinds of data that you need, the number of projects that you need, and then how to do a detailed analysis. And so we took those lessons here, and on this study, did those same methodology, collected a large number of projects. You can see here, this data was collected via a survey questionnaire, which we developed. It was very similar to the original 1998 study with a few additions, because we also wanted to see how the team environment contributed to project performance. We also wanted to see how technology was impacting it. But we didn't want to lose any of that good data that they collected related to project delivery. So when team members were procured, what the contract method was, when they were involved, some detailed performance data, how much the project cost at the initial stages, how much it cost at the end, when it was planned to start, when it actually started, when it was planned to end, when did it actually end, right? That gives us that detailed data. And you can see here, we actually had more than 200 survey responses. We actually had over 300, but we didn't want to use them all because we wanted to verify that data. And so we called all the owners back and confirmed, is this right? Is this an accurate representation of your company? And then we came back to 212 projects total. So what you see here is 212 verified projects. These are ones that we confirmed all of the project data on, and we're very confident in those. And here you can see the different breakdown of delivery methods. So it's actually getting harder to find design, bid, build projects. We really wanted equal numbers of each, but that's becoming challenging. And the breakdown of funding sources here was about 60-40, public-private. And so this gives you also an idea of the projects within that data set. So we used the same classification system that they used in the 1998 study, which is what you see on the left there. So it ranges from light industrial, which would be like a parking garage or a warehouse, something that's very simple to construct, all the way down to high tech, which is your hospitals and your data centers. And so we had a lot of projects kind of in that middle range of complexity, but we did capture everything along that spectrum. And then on the right, you see the facility sizes. So what size projects were we dealing with? Well, about 25% of them or so were less than 50,000 square feet. And if we try to get to 50%, that would be less than 150,000 square feet. And we did go all the way up to about 1 million or so. Okay, so at the very high end is 1 million, the very low end is about 10,000. These were all building projects, so vertical construction facilities that we were able to identify the size of via their square footage. And so what we did was we performed what's called a best subsets analysis. And so we took all of those variables from the survey and ran this analysis, which looks at different combinations of those variables and which ones best predict the performance measure that we're interested in. And so you run through several iterations of these to find the one that best predicts that measure that we're interested in. And here you can see we're predicting cost growth. There's several different measures you can look at to determine the fit of the model. Here, I'm just showing you R squared, and I promise that's the only real statistic that we'll talk about today. It's called the coefficient of determination, and all it really means is how much variance we're explaining with the variables in the model. And so an R squared of 100% indicates that we're explaining all of the variation in the model. That would be a perfect model. Excellent, everyone wants that. 0% would be you're explaining none of the variation and it's terrible and no one wants that. So you want to be somewhere between 0 and 100, preferably closer to the 100 end. So that's the analysis method. I promised I wouldn't talk more about it. Keith's giving me a look. So if you have more questions on the analysis, please see us afterwards. So here's what the results look like for the cost models that we prepared. Okay, so unit cost and cost growth. So in terms of unit cost, design build, still outperforms the alternatives in terms of the cost per square foot. And while it may seem like, okay, this is only within a couple percent of each other, it actually is maybe more significant than that, because remember that our models control for things like facility family. They control for complexity. Okay, they control for the funding source. Okay, they control for all those things that you might say, well, of course design build maybe is cheaper, or design bid build might be cheaper, right? We're controlling for that, and we're still seeing differences in unit cost across those delivery methods. Then in terms of cost growth, we see again, design build has lower cost growth than the alternatives. And we look at the R-squareds here. Our unit cost, we're very certain in. Cost growth, we have an R-squared of about 22%. That's very similar to what the 1998 study was able to explain. I think they were around 23%. So we're very close there. So what were some of the variables that actually contributed to those performance measures related to cost? Well, if we look at unit cost, two big contributors that I'll talk about here are higher team chemistry and open book contracting terms. So projects that had both of those characteristics tended to have lower unit costs overall. So higher team chemistry, what is that? That seems vague. I thought so too, but they used it on the original study, and it turns out people know when they have good team chemistry and when they don't. So they either know it's excellent or they know it's poor. They may not know it's somewhere in between, but they can sure tell you what that team environment is like with a single question. And then in terms of open book contracting terms, we're specifically talking about things that encourage transparency and cost. So things like a cost reimbursable contract, so a cost plus a fee or a cost plus a fee with a GMP, or even some sort of time and material or unit price type contract. When we look at cost growth, we see some similar variables show up again. So projects with lower cost growth tended to have, again, higher team chemistry, open book contracting terms, but then we start to get some delivery mixed in here. So earlier timing of involvement of the builder and the use of a design build delivery system. So cost impacted by a lot of the same types of factors in our data set. So when we go to schedule, in terms of schedule growth, design build, again, higher performance here, okay, lower schedule growth overall. And then we get to construction speed and delivery speed, and this is where it gets interesting compared to the 1998 study. Okay, this performance gap here is widened significantly. Okay, these have gone up by 2/3 or so from what it was in 1998. So for those of you that don't know, construction speed, delivery speed, these are just measures that we use to sort of roughly approximate how quickly a project is built. So it's in square feet per month. And so delivery speed looks at all the way from design initiation all the way to final completion, and construction speed looks at notice to proceed to substantial completion. And so you have speeds associated with both the construction phase and then the overall project delivery phase. And in both cases, design build is considerably faster than the alternatives. So if we look at what are the variables that help us predict schedule growth, okay, we have a couple different sets of variables here. First being participation of the team in goal setting. So we asked who helped to set the project goals, and those projects that actually involved the designer and the builder, and it wasn't just the owner handing them down, tended to have lower schedule growth. We see early involvement here again. And then if we look at delivery speed and construction speed, these were primarily influenced, maybe quite obviously, by the delivery method, delivery system. Okay, those that had more overlap design and construction tended to be delivered faster. Okay, and the numbers support that. So we weren't happy just looking at the quantitative side. We also wanted to dig a bit deeper into the data. And this is where we started to diverge a little bit from the 1998 study. So here we said, all right, we know what variables are important for performance. Let's look at how they did it on those projects. So we went and we looked at all of our performance measures, and we identified the best and the worst performing projects. Okay, so at the one end, we said what are our top 25% of projects? So depending on which measure you're looking at, this could be at the right of the bell curve or the left of the bell curve. So we want lower cost growth, but we want faster delivery speed, right? And so we looked then at the other end, looked at our worst performers. And so within those shaded regions, we tried to find projects that showed up in at least 3 of those 4 regions. We classified those as either good performers or best performers or our worst performers. Okay, and then we went back to those projects. We called those folks back to talk to them and say, how'd you do it? We actually got a pretty good response rate of people wanting to talk to us again, despite the fact that we were calling about a worst performing project. Okay? That was good. People are willing to talk about some of the failures. And so here's what we found. So on the best performing project side, they all share similar stories. Okay? Everyone that we talked to had a very similar story to tell. Yeah, the people were different. Yeah, some of the events were different, but there were really 2 themes that came out. Right? First being this emphasis being placed on a relational project culture. Okay, so owners issuing expectations to the team that they wanted this project to be collaborative, not adversarial, not transactional. Okay, you come in and you work as a team. A lot of different ways that they did this, ranging all the way from owner comes in and tells you how to do it, and you do it, to getting the whole team together and developing a charter for how they wanted that team to perform during the project. So plenty of different ways to do it. However they did it didn't seem to be as important. It was really that relational project culture was emphasized. And then the second thing was a persistent pattern of repeated relationships. So for a lot of these projects in our best performing group, it wasn't the first project that they had done with that owner. So you had the same designer, same contractor, working with that owner on 2 or 3 different projects. And so you sort of short-circuit that whole team development process. Because you've been with these folks before, you know how they operate, you can skip ahead a little bit on that team development curve and start performing at a team much earlier. Okay? So that probably shouldn't surprise anyone here in the room. If you've all been on successful projects, you've probably seen something similar to this. Then we get to our worst performing projects. And I'm reminded of a quote from Tolstoy that was written like 100 years ago, over 100 years ago. And it's that happy families are all alike, but unhappy families are each unhappy in their own way. Okay, and so maybe that resonates with folks as well, in that we saw a lot of commonalities on our best performing projects. But when we get to these worst performing projects, they all had a different story to tell. There's 1,000,001 things that they thought caused these projects to, be delivered late or be delivered over budget. Okay, so there's a lot of different things we can talk about here. In the interest of time, I'm just going to hit on 3 that I thought were fairly interesting and maybe encapsulated some of the other issues that they brought up. First being a lack of experience. So either it was a first-time project manager who is new with the owner organization, or maybe it was the owner's first time working with a delivery method, their first time using design build, or first time using CMR. The second thing was poor communication, and I use this as just a broad umbrella to capture a lot of issues dealing with people just, the key to communication is the right information to the right person at the right time. And if you're missing any one of those things, you're going to have bad communication. So I'm using this as a broad umbrella to capture a lot of issues, but communication was a universal problem on these poor performers. And then lastly, which I thought was really interesting, was turnover. So there's one project in particular where a project manager took a career opportunity at a different company mid-project. They didn't replace him quickly, and so a lot of the work fell to the next in line, led to a lot of stress on his part, high workloads. He ended up leaving because of that, and so it just starts a downward spiral, and by the time they caught up, it was just too late. There's not enough you can do to rescue that project. It's going to be late. It's going to be over budget. You just got to deal with it. And so what I think is interesting about all of these characteristics in our best performing and worst performing projects is that they're all organizational in nature. None of these are technical issues. And in fact, technical issues occurred on both groups of projects. Okay, they all had soil issues that required undercutting, and they all had late material deliveries, and they all had redesigns, right? The difference was that our best performing projects had teams that didn't get tripped up by those technical issues. Whereas on our worst performers, the technical issues were just, they didn't have the team to deal with it, and so they couldn't recover. So to try to bring everything together from both sides here, from the quantitative side, we see that after 20 years, design-build projects are still delivered faster and with greater reliability and cost and schedule performance. And then from looking at those case studies, looking a bit deeper into why the best performers were successful, right, we can recommend a few things regardless of what the delivery method is. So these could work, I guess, in any delivery method. First being assembling the project team early, trying to get the designer or the builder together, right, preferably during schematic design or earlier. I guess that does limit your delivery method a little bit. But ultimately, the purpose of that is to develop a relational culture, okay, to make it so that everyone is on the same page, everyone's working towards the same objective, the same goal. And communicating expectations clearly. Don't let anyone have to guess what you want. Tell them what you want so that they can help you. The standard of quality is established, and everyone's working towards the same objective, right? And lastly, to take that last lesson learned, engage in succession planning. People come and go from construction projects all the time. Just phasing takes people away. They get transferred to different jobs. Happens all the time, but I don't know if we give enough, effort towards planning for those people that come and go to make sure that they're not disrupting our projects. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Keith, and he's going to wrap us up.
Thanks, Bryan. Well, again, I encourage you to read those reports. There's a lot of good information. Really, the 1998 study holds true, and there's good work there, and I'd encourage you to dig a little bit deeper into our results. But looking at the theme of the conference and looking ahead, I wanted to just take a moment and think about where we're heading. We actually had a difficult time repeating the study because, as Bryan said, we collected a lot more data than we could use because so many of the project delivery methods today are not so crisp. We're blending procurement, delivery, contracting methods in unique ways. And so what I would consider is things are becoming blurred, and we're just not doing it in such a traditional manner. In the near term, I think we should continue to do that. We should take the best from design build and use it in our design bid build projects. We should take the best from CMGC and use it on our design bid build projects. If you look at how we can get through this transition, I think there's themes both in the 1998 study and what we found, and that is qualifications-based selection instead of low bid, early involvement, especially specialty contractors. The earlier we can get them involved, and then cost transparency, open book when we can use it. All of these things are moving us in the right direction. Incremental steps, but we're really moving in the right direction. When we look towards the future, even more so, where do I see the industry going? I truly believe we need to get to fully integrated projects. If you look at the results in depth, what we're really seeing is delivery methods are less important than team cohesion, than groups working together, than some of these early involvement issues. CII is doing work in the area. A recent team, RT 341, developed tools around integrated project delivery for industrial projects. I think we need to keep moving as an industry in this direction, getting away from our traditional separation of design and construction, truly moving towards team integration and shared goals, shared incentives, and I think we are moving in that direction. So I hope I'll be around in 20 years to redo this study again, and we'll talk more about how integration has been helping us along. So to wrap things up here, again, hopefully you know better now how to describe to your owners and your colleagues how project delivery works with cost and schedule. We've identified the variables that really influence the performance, and then hopefully some of these lessons learned on the case studies of best and worst performing projects help you out. So we would really like to thank the Charles Pankow Foundation and CII and all the team members for helping us with the project. So that's it. And do we have time for questions?
Yes, we got a couple questions. Are you going to field the questions, or do you want me to?
Can you field the questions? Yes.
Of course I can. So first question is, we have a few, by the way. What are your thoughts about integrated project delivery?
Yeah, so we tried to collect data on integrated project delivery on this and a related Pankow study. I think the definition of integrated project delivery has a lot of variance across the industry right now. If you truly look at a multi-party contract with shared incentives and disincentives, I think those are all key, the use of target pricing. I think what we are seeing in integrated project delivery is very promising. I think it's difficult for owners to get there, though, to truly use that multi-party contract and the target type pricing. But when you can, I really do see the benefits. It ties in very well to the lessons learned in our delivery study.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is, this showed based on square footage. Is this primarily relevant to commercial building versus industrial projects?
Yeah, so the project types that we had looked at, I mean, we did have a few industrial projects in there, but again, they were ones that could be contained within an area. So like a chemical plant probably wouldn't yield very well to this type of analysis because the facility is not really contained. It's mostly piping. So I think that it applies very well to types of vertical construction. I think it applies very well to manufacturing. When we start to get into purely industrial facilities, I'm not sure I would extrapolate it out. I don't know if you have a different thought there.
Yeah. We did a similar study for the Federal Highway Administration looking at CMGC, they call it in the highway industry, design build and design bid build. And CMGC actually had some unique advantages and was actually faster than design build for the highway sector. So I would be interested, with so much EPC in the industrial side to see how the delivery methods perform. I think the themes will be similar, but we might see a little bit different results than what we saw with the buildings.
To what would you attribute the overall decline in scheduled delivery shown for all three delivery approaches?
Yeah, so when we look at delivery speed, sort of the overall delivery speed seems to have gone down, even though the gap between them has sort of widened. And to really answer that, you really have to dig into the data and look at the types of facilities that were included in both data sets, because that's one of the variables that's highly dependent on what you have. And so when you go back and look at the 1998 study, they had a considerably higher percentage of light industrial facilities, which end up being, that warehouse type facility. So you end up with, a lot of square footage, but they're not difficult buildings to construct, which sort of creates artificially high delivery speeds. And so that gets controlled for in the regression models that I talked about, because you're controlling for the facility type and the size together. And that's why we're a bit more confident and we like the regression model results, so the percent differences, more so than just looking at the median and saying, well, the median is lower in the 1990, in the 2018 study versus the 1998 study, because that is highly reliant on the data and the types of projects that you end up with.
Okay. You want something to add?
I would just say, also take from it that the relative differences were in the same order. And so, again, that's a pretty consistent result when you think about a 20-year span.
Last question regarding quality. Was the issue of quality considered or measured or not? What are your thoughts about this?
Oh, okay, we could talk a lot about quality and how quality is measured in project delivery studies, but that's like another talk. So we did collect quality data, and the way that we didn't represent it in this study. So there is a larger study that was done with Pankow where we actually looked at the quality side of it. We represented quality as sort of a latent construct based on how the owner perceived the environmental systems, the structure, the design of their building, and I think we did it quite well on that side of the study. So we didn't really bring it in here because that really wasn't how the 1998 study reported it. They stuck to the quantitative variables. Quality is just difficult to pin down in a statistical way.
Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thanks.